The Murder of Skylar Neese, 2012. Part 1. The Summer They Stopped Being Friends. It was the kind of small town where everyone knew your name and where nothing truly bad was supposed to happen. Star City, West Virginia. Population under 2,000. A quiet, working-class suburb of Morgantown where most people kept their doors unlocked and their lives predictable. In 2012, Skylar Neese was 16, a straight-A student, fiercely independent, witty, a little stubborn. The kind of teenager who rolled her eyes at authority, but always followed the rules anyway. She worked part-time at a local Wendy's and kept a tight circle of friends. Two of those friends would later become infamous: Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf. To outsiders, they were inseparable. Three teenage girls with big personalities, endless inside jokes, and matching photos all over social media. Their friendship looked typical: loud sleepovers, group texts, birthday photos, that slightly messy, overly emotional closeness that defines being a teenage girl. But underneath the surface, things were shifting. Sheila was dramatic, charismatic, manipulative. The kind of girl who could charm adults while cutting down her friends behind their backs. Rachel was quieter, religious, conflicted, constantly pulled between who she wanted to be and who Sheila needed her to be. Skylar didn't always fit. As the months wore on, she found herself becoming the third wheel. Sheila and Rachel grew closer, secretive, cliquish. They started hanging out without Skylar, whispered more, laughed less. Skylar noticed. She started tweeting cryptic things. Posts like, "Too bad my friends are all fake. Just know I know." She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. Behind the glowing filters and smiley faces was a growing storm, a mess of betrayal, envy, and something darker, something cruel. Still, Skylar stayed. She wanted to believe things could return to normal, that her best friends weren't shutting her out, that the jokes and selfies still meant something. But that summer, the gap grew wider. The three of them fought more, said hurtful things, laughed less. Trust cracked. At home, Skylar's parents, Mary and Dave, noticed changes. Skylar was still polite, still helpful, but quieter. More guarded. She didn't talk as much, didn't smile as easily. And then came July the 5th, 2012. A warm summer evening, fireworks still echoing in the hills. Skylar returned home from work, hugged her parents, went to her room, and never came out again. That night, she climbed out of her bedroom window around midnight. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera captured her sneaking into the back seat of a sedan parked just down the road. She was wearing a hoodie. She never came back. The next morning, her parents knocked on her door and found the room empty. The window was open, the screen pushed out. Her bed was untouched, her phone charger still plugged in, her closet undisturbed. They waited, then worried, then panicked. By that afternoon, they were at the police station filing a missing person report. And when officers asked who she might have left with, one name came up immediately: Sheila Eddy, Skylar's best friend. And the beginning of a story that would leave a scar across the heart of a community and unravel a friendship in the most horrifying way imaginable. Part 2. Secrets, Screenshots, and Silent Rage. The morning after Skylar Neese vanished, Mary and Dave Neese knew something was wrong. Skylar had never done anything like this before. She didn't sneak out. She didn't lie. She didn't disappear without texting someone. Her window was open, her phone was gone, but her contact lenses, her toothbrush, her charger, all still in place. She hadn't planned a runaway. It was something else. And soon, it would become everyone's problem. Flyers with her picture were posted across Morgantown. Local news ran her story that same week. Police assumed at first it was a typical case of a rebellious teenager, a night out gone long. But her parents were adamant. This wasn't Skylar. Something had happened. They pushed the investigation forward, hard. The surveillance footage from the neighbor's camera showed what no one wanted to believe: Skylar sneaking into a silver sedan at 12:31 a.m. The timestamp was clear, but the car's license plate wasn't. Investigators showed it to her friends, her co-workers, her classmates. One name kept coming up: Sheila Eddy. Sheila had been Skylar's best friend since childhood. They had done everything together: school dances, sleepovers, road trips. Skylar called her a sister. And yet now, Sheila had changed. In the weeks after the disappearance, Sheila acted off. She was too public, too involved. She posted constant updates on social media, begging Skylar to come home. She cried on camera. She hugged Mary and Dave at the vigil. She told reporters she had no idea what had happened, but behind the scenes, she was distant. Rachel Schoaf, the third member of the group, was even more anxious. She grew quiet, erratic. She missed school, broke down during church events, pulled away from friends. Her behavior was unsettling, enough that some adults took notice. Meanwhile, Skylar's Twitter account remained online. Her last few tweets were cryptic. "You doing shit like this is why I will never completely trust you. Just know I know." And then, silence. Detectives subpoenaed Skylar's phone records. They traced the final pings. It went dark in rural Pennsylvania, not far from the state line. A dead zone, nothing but woods and hills. No reason for a teenage girl to be out there. They questioned Sheila. She said she and Rachel picked Skylar up around midnight, drove her around to smoke marijuana, then dropped her off a block away so she wouldn't wake her parents. It was a flimsy story, and as the weeks passed, it began to fall apart. Police checked cell tower data. The girls' phones pinged miles away from the supposed drop-off point, deep into Pennsylvania. It didn't match their version, and then they found screenshots. A student had taken photos of Rachel's tweets and messages. Some were strange, others were chilling. A cryptic tweet from Sheila stood out. "We really did go on 3. It was a private joke, or a confession." Still, there was no body, no crime scene, no direct evidence, just a missing girl, 2 anxious teens, and a mountain of suspicion. Skylar's parents refused to back down. They spoke to reporters. They begged the public for help. They called every day for updates. And as they did, Sheila kept posting, acting like a grieving friend while online sleuths began to doubt every word she typed. Rachel stopped speaking to Sheila. The two drifted apart. And somewhere in that silence, the truth began to weigh heavier than either of them could bear. Because Skylar Neese wasn't just missing, she was murdered, and one of the killers was about to break. Part 3, The Last Night. It was the summer after sophomore year. The air was heavy with heat, the kind that stuck to your skin and made everything feel slower. Skylar Neese had spent most of that July evening doing what she usually did, working a shift at Wendy's, joking with coworkers, and texting her friends. She came home around 10:30 p.m., hugged her parents, and went into her bedroom. The lights dimmed. The TV murmured in the background. A normal summer night. No one knew it would be her last. At 12:31 a.m., July 6, 2012, Skylar climbed out of her bedroom window, something she had never done before. A neighbor's grainy surveillance camera caught the moment she slipped into the back seat of a car parked just down the street. A silver Toyota Camry, owned by Sheila Eddy's mother. Skylar was wearing flip-flops, no purse, no overnight bag, just her phone, a hoodie, and the belief that she was spending the night with her 2 closest friends. She thought they were going to drive around, smoke a little weed, laugh, reconnect. Instead, they drove her to her death. Sheila and Rachel had packed the trunk ahead of time, with paper towels, bleach, fresh clothes, a shovel, and kitchen knives. They'd even brought a spare change of clothes to wear during the murder. They had planned everything. The 3 girls drove across the West Virginia border into Pennsylvania to a remote spot in the woods near Brave, a desolate, overgrown area they had visited before. It was pitch black. Not a single light in sight. Just trees, dirt, and the sound of insects buzzing in the heat. They parked. Skylar got out. So did Sheila and Rachel. They walked a little ways into the woods, chatting casually, laughing, pretending. At some point, Skylar bent down to retrieve a lighter. And that's when it happened. On the count of 3, they attacked. They stabbed her over and over, more than 50 times. Skylar fought back, screamed, tried to run. But she was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and left bleeding on the forest floor. Her last word, Rachel would later confess, was, "Why?" They didn't answer. They just kept going. When it was over, they tried to bury her. The ground was too hard, so they dragged her body to a patch of dirt and covered her with branches and rocks. Then they cleaned up. They changed clothes, threw their bloodied garments into garbage bags, used paper towels to wipe their hands, got back in the car and drove away, like nothing had happened. Sheila dropped Rachel off, then went home. By sunrise, Skylar's parents were waking up to an empty bed and an open window. By mid-morning, they were calling her phone, knocking on neighbors' doors, walking the neighborhood. Sheila texted them, pretending to be worried. She tweeted about her missing best friend. And all the while, she knew. She knew where Skylar's body was. She knew why she wasn't answering. She knew the truth. But she didn't say a word. Part 4. Missing but not forgotten. For months after Skylar Neese disappeared, her parents refused to give up hope. Mary and Dave put up flyers, spoke to reporters, and met with detectives almost daily. They appeared on the news pleading for information. They drove through rural West Virginia and parts of Pennsylvania, calling their daughter's name and praying for a break. But Skylar wasn't coming home, and Sheila Eddy was doing everything she could to act like she still believed she would. She cried on camera. She posted daily updates on Twitter and Facebook. She handed out missing person flyers. She sat beside Skylar's parents at vigils, holding their hands, pretending to grieve with them. But behind the public performance, detectives were watching closely. They had already flagged inconsistencies in Sheila and Rachel's stories. Cell tower records placed their phones far from the location where they claimed to have dropped Skylar off. Text logs contradicted their timelines. Then came the social media trail. At first, Sheila's tweets were sympathetic, full of memories and hopeful hashtags. But gradually, they became darker, more cryptic. She tweeted, "No one on this earth can handle me and Rachel. If you think you can, you're wrong." Another post simply read, "We really did go on 3. Rachel, meanwhile, was unraveling. She pulled away from Sheila. Her grades dropped. She stopped attending school functions. Her behavior became erratic. Her parents noticed, and so did police. In December 2012, 5 months after Skylar's disappearance, investigators brought Rachel in for more questioning. She didn't confess, but something had changed. She was cracking. By January, she was hospitalized for emotional distress. Whatever weight she had been carrying was finally crushing her. And then, on January 3rd, 2013, 6 months to the day after Skylar vanished, Rachel Schoaf walked into the office of her attorney and made a full confession. She told police everything, that she and Sheila had planned the murder for weeks, that they had lured Skylar out under the pretense of hanging out, that they had driven her to a wooded area, and that they had stabbed her to death. When asked why they did it, her answer stunned even seasoned detectives. "We didn't like her anymore." It was that simple, that cold. They didn't like her anymore. Rachel agreed to lead police to the body. In the dead of winter, surrounded by snow and silence, detectives followed her to the site in rural Greene County, Pennsylvania, just across the state line. There, beneath a blanket of branches and dirt, they found the remains of Skylar Neese. Her body was positively identified through dental records. The case was no longer a missing person. It was murder. Mary and Dave were devastated, but they were not surprised. They had always suspected Sheila and Rachel knew more than they were saying. But what no parent wants to believe, that your child's best friends could be her killers, had now become fact. Sheila, still maintaining her innocence, was arrested months later. Her performance cracked. She cried. She asked for Rachel. She didn't understand how everything had collapsed so quickly. But the truth was out. Skylar Neese was dead. And the people who killed her had once been the people she trusted most. Part 5. A guilty conscience and a confession. Rachel Schoaf's confession hit Star City like a shockwave. It was one thing to suspect, another to fear. But to hear it, to know that she and Sheila Eddy, 2 girls who had once laughed with Skylar, shared secrets with her, called her their best friend, had planned and carried out her murder. That was something else entirely. Rachel's voice on the recorded confession was steady, cold, almost rehearsed. "We just didn't like her anymore," she said again. That phrase echoed through every headline, every courtroom, every home that followed the case. Investigators were stunned by the lack of motive. No love triangle, no revenge, no money, just teenage cruelty, sharpened by peer pressure, social dynamics, and a toxic loyalty to each other. Rachel's deal was simple. She would plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for her cooperation. She was now the state's key witness, and she agreed to testify against Sheila. Sheila Eddy, on the other hand, still denied everything. She kept posting online, tweeting song lyrics, vague sadness, and nostalgia. It was as if she was living in a parallel reality, pretending nothing had changed. Even after Rachel's arrest, even after Skylar's body was found, she acted like it wasn't real, But police were closing in. They had Rachel's statement. They had GPS data, phone logs, surveillance footage, and Sheila's own digital footprint, filled with contradictions and eerie hints. In May 2013, nearly a year after Skylar's disappearance, Sheila was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. She was 17 years old. The town watched in stunned silence as she was led out of her home in handcuffs. The girl who had once cried beside Mary Neese now faced life in prison for murdering her daughter. In court, Sheila remained quiet. Her lawyers negotiated a plea deal. On January 24, 2014, more than a year and a half after the murder, Sheila Eddy pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Rachel Schoaf had already been sentenced earlier that week to 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10. 2 girls, 2 friends, 2 murderers. They were transferred to separate correctional facilities. They would not see each other again. For Skylar's parents, there was no real comfort. Justice, maybe. Closure, partially. But the grief was forever. They had lost their only child in the most brutal, senseless way imaginable. Dave Neese later told the press, "She was my everything, my life. You may as well just take me, too." Mary Neese fought to keep her daughter's memory alive. She worked with lawmakers to introduce Skylar's Law, requiring immediate public alerts for missing children, even if authorities don't initially suspect abduction. Her daughter didn't get a second chance, but maybe others would. What Skylar left behind wasn't just pain, it was change. It was awareness. It was a reminder that evil can wear a familiar face, that betrayal can grow slowly, quietly, in the places we least expect it, that even a best friend can be a killer. Part 6. The crime scene and the arrests. When Rachel Schoaf led investigators into the woods of Brave, Pennsylvania, it was bitter cold. Snow still clung to the tree roots, and the wind cut through their coats as they followed her deep into the thicket. There was no trail, no clear path, just the memory of a teenage girl who had buried a secret for too long. She stopped near a patch of disturbed earth, now hardened by months of weather. "There," she said. Detectives began the excavation. Under branches, dirt, and rocks, they found human remains, bones, fibers, and tattered clothing. Dental records would later confirm what Rachel already knew. It was Skylar. Forensic teams worked the scene for hours. They uncovered fragments of her hoodie, bloodied cloth, and strands of her hair. The site was exactly as Rachel described. It had remained untouched since the night of July 6, 2012, when she and Sheila had taken Skylar's life. Now, there was no more denying it. Rachel's detailed confession became the center of the case. She had described the drive, the stabbing, the panic, the attempted burial, the bleach, the clothes. Every grim detail matched what was found in the woods. Investigators pulled together their case against Sheila Eddy. It was airtight. Sheila had helped plan the murder, helped bring the knives. She had driven the car. She had counted down before the attack. She had continued her life for 6 months as if nothing had happened. Still, her arrest shocked the town. Sheila had presented herself as the grieving best friend. She had clung to Mary and Dave Neese at vigils. She had tweeted Skylar's name and posted old photos. Her performance was convincing, almost eerily so. But it was all an act. On May 1st, 2013, officers arrested Sheila while she was driving. Dashcam footage showed her stunned expression as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. She didn't resist. She barely spoke. She was charged with murder and conspiracy. Her bond was denied. In the weeks that followed, more evidence came out. Surveillance footage of Skylar leaving her house, cell phone tower, data proving where the girls had driven that night. The knives, purchased days earlier. Sheila's browser history, Rachel's text messages. Each piece built the case like a puzzle, and the picture it formed was devastating. The motive remained horrifying in its simplicity. There was no rage, no argument, no moment of passion. They just didn't want to be her friend anymore. Skylar Neese had been killed not by a stranger, not in a robbery, not in a tragic accident, but by 2 girls she trusted. 2 girls she called her best friends. 2 girls she had laughed with, cried with, and stood beside for years. Mary and Dave Neese attended every hearing. They faced the girls who had destroyed their world. And they listened, silently, bravely, as their daughter's final moments were read aloud in open court. The image of Skylar, alone in the woods, betrayed, abandoned, stayed with them. But so did her strength. She had fought back. She had screamed. She had asked, why? And even though no answer could ever be enough, the truth was finally known. The masks had fallen, and justice was beginning to take shape. Part 7. Justice, Grief, and What Skylar Left Behind. In January 2014, the courtroom was silent as the final chapter of Skylar Neese's story was written. Sheila Eddy, now 18, stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. She admitted everything: the plan, the knives, the motive. She agreed to a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Rachel Schoaf had already received 30 years for second-degree murder, with eligibility for parole after 10. The case was over, but nothing felt finished. Mary and Dave Neese, who had lived every day for a year and a half in search of answers, now had them, and they were horrifying. Their daughter had been betrayed, slaughtered, and discarded like trash in the woods. And the killers had walked beside them, comforted them, even cried with them. Grief, in its purest form, became their daily companion. Still, they chose to act. Skylar had slipped through the cracks of outdated missing persons policies. Because there was no immediate sign of abduction, an Amber Alert wasn't issued. The first hours after her disappearance, the most crucial, were lost. So, Mary and Dave fought to change that. In her honor, they helped pass Skylar's Law, legislation in West Virginia that now mandates immediate public alerts for any missing child believed to be in danger, even without signs of abduction. Several other states would later follow suit. Skylar had made an impact in life. Now she would make one in death. Over the years, her story became the subject of books, documentaries, and online analysis. People around the world were shocked that two young girls could commit such a calculated, cold-blooded crime, not for revenge or gain, but because they simply didn't want someone in their lives anymore. It was a reminder that evil doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it smiles, it jokes, it shares secrets and selfies. Sometimes it's wearing your best friend's face. Skylar's Twitter account remained frozen in time, a digital diary of a girl who saw the change coming but didn't know how far it would go. Her final posts, especially "Just Know I Know," haunted readers everywhere. Those words became a haunting echo of intuition, a whisper from a girl who sensed betrayal but never imagined how deep it ran. The house where Skylar once lived is quiet now, her bedroom untouched, her belongings frozen in place, a room suspended in the summer of 2012. Her parents carry her memory like a torch and a scar. Every day is a choice, to live in pain or to live with purpose. They chose purpose, to speak her name, to tell her story, to protect other children from vanishing without a voice. Skylar Neese was more than a victim. She was kind, brilliant, honest, brave. And in her final moments, she proved that bravery. She fought. She asked why. And because she did, the world finally found out. And it will never forget her.